All right, good evening, everybody. It's time for us to get started. This is our last class for the quarter. So we're going to actually start in on the book of Romans next week, Lord willing. And we'll end tonight on talking about divorce and remarriage, because why not? It's certainly a problem in our culture. I couldn't find anything that was, I've been trying to go lighthearted and humorous, but I actually had some pretty good news in researching it, some surprising things about it, but it's still bad. So let's go ahead and have a prayer and we'll get started. Father in heaven, thank you so much for all that you do for us, the love that you show us daily, the blessings that we have that you shower on us, and we thank you, Lord, for that. We know that it's only because of your Son, Jesus. Lord, we pray as we go through our lives that you'll help us to be mindful of how we behave and the reasons we do the things that we do, and also the opportunities that we see around us. Help us, Father, to see them, to take advantage of them, and for you to be glorified. Lord, please help us in our homes, that we'll have good, strong marriages, and family structure will be strong in accordance with your will. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. Okay, so this was actually, you can see the link on the bottom there if you want to look it up. It's actually from a family law practice, which kind of makes sense. They deal with this kind of stuff a lot. And in my research, I couldn't find any good statistics, which is probably a good thing, because you know how statistics are. We can make them up on the spot and tell everyone that they're true. But the prevailing wisdom has been always that at least 50%. But from what I've seen, people are saying that the divorce rate is actually falling, and it has been for some time. I don't know what time it means. I know I think over the last decade. And they said surprisingly, it fell even more during COVID than the average. And I would have expected the opposite of that. So that was actually pretty good news. I think probably maybe after COVID, after everything was shut down and people could get out and do things, it probably jumped back up to where it was before. I don't know. I didn't see any statistics on that. Mainly because how do you judge when we actually started being normal again? There's some places that are still not normal, so I don't know how to judge it. In this article I downloaded on the 17th, it says that gave several reasons people get divorced. So there's many reasons people decide their marriage is not working. Poor communication and lack of commitment are two of the top contributing factors for divorce. People also report constant arguing, infidelity, inequality, immaturity, abuse, financial hardship as their reasons for divorce. You can see a lot of our culture demonstrated in all these things. They tell us about ourselves as a people. Shockingly, 73% of people said lack of commitment. This is 73% of the people that divorced said it was for a lack of commitment. 56% blamed constant arguing, and 55% cited infidelity as a reason for their marriage failing. Now, some of that I don't know how to interpret. I don't know how you would say that infidelity and lack of commitment aren't the same. I don't know what they mean by lack of commitment, right? So to me, if you have a lack of commitment in a marriage, that just means you're going to be looking for a way out, which is pretty much what infidelity is. I guess you could do that without actually having infidelity, though, so I guess that makes sense. So the biggest reason is people just don't want to be married anymore. They don't want to commit, or they're tired of being committed. And so the majority of people that end up married, a big portion of them are not going to make it to their both being married until death, until one of them dies. Yeah, Linda? 180%? Sorry, I just had to bring that out. Well, you can have more than one reason for divorce. But yeah, that's a good point. So many people express for not trying harder to make their union work. So What does that tell you? That some people are, it says many numbers. It says that at least some people are getting divorces without really trying to work it out, which again shows. So it's just, what does our society say about divorce? It's no big deal. You go do it, right? Is this thing cutting in and out, or is it just me? Okay. It's probably because it's in my pocket. All right. So it's no big deal. It doesn't hurt anybody. In fact, I've heard people say that, we have, now I understand when they say this kind of stuff, they have good divorces and bad divorces, right? Some of them are amicable and some of them are not. And it's kind of mind-blowing to me how that all could work out. I could not handle it. But there are many people who divorce and they are friends for the rest of their lives. And it's as if nothing changed except they're not living together. So this is what we're seeing more and more of. But there are a surprising number of people, I guess, I don't know if it's surprising. There are a lot of people who express regret for not trying harder. And then we have divorce rates and age. The divorce rates are higher for certain age groups. Very young couples face the biggest challenges in marriage. They have to overcome immaturity, financial problems, jealousy, and family pressures. Plus, people change a lot from 18 to 25. Many couples just grow apart. Of couples who enter into a teen marriage, 32% will divorce before they reach their 5th wedding anniversary. So 32% will be divorced by the time they've reached 5 years. 20% of individuals from 20 to 24 divorce within 5 years. 15% of 25 to 29-year-olds will divorce before 5 years. But statistics from recent years show that your chances of getting a divorce rise to 19% after age 35. So between 29 and 35 is the golden time period for people getting married. There are a lot of changes. We all remember how it is in your early 20s, and by the time you get in your 30s, you kind of settle down and you start to get into a life, and so it's not much of a surprise, but it goes back up again after age 35. What I was reading, the article was telling us about saying this, that is given reasons why they think that happens. And they say before 29, there's a lot of immaturity issues. And then after 35, you're set in your ways. So, and we've run across that too. People are single for a long time and they get married. It's really, really difficult for them to work it out. Even second marriages or, second marriages would fit into that too, or even third or fourth marriages on top of that. So they're already set in their ways and it's very difficult for them to change. So that's some of the statistics. The 32% is pretty high. 14 marriages calling it quits within 5 years. I don't know what they are, 10 years or 20 years. I couldn't find anything on that in this article. But the 5-year mark, that's a lot of people. And it tells us our society is still struggling with this when we already knew that, right? All right, let's look at Matthew chapter 19. I was talking to an old man one time, and I was saying, okay, he was a preacher. I said, okay, how do we fix this? How do we deal with divorce? Just looking at him. And, how are we going to teach people about this? And he said, you don't start with talking about divorce. You start with talking about marriage, which I agree. We need more training and teaching on how to make marriage work. And that's a good thing, but we also need to lay the groundwork, say, okay, this is what it is when you're married. This is how God expects it to be. All right, Adam? I don't know. Yeah, it could be because I read other places that said statistically if you divorce, you're far more likely to divorce again if you marry again. In fact, every time you marry after a divorce, statistically, the chances grow even more. of it happening. So you weren't raising your hand, right? You're fixing your hair, okay? So I think we already knew that. It's pretty high as it is. What do you think it is? How do you think it is now I'm not going to say the church here, or the Church of Christ, because I don't know any stats on that, but religiously speaking, people that call themselves Christians, what are the stats, generally speaking, compared to the rest of the world? About the same, yeah. I would love to see how it is in the church. I would probably not be surprised to see that it's pretty much the same. I couldn't tell you for sure. But I was sitting there thinking the other day, there are a lot of people that I've known that got married that they made it. They're still going strong, so it's possible. But then again, generally speaking, what happens when if you're attending a church and you divorce, what tends to happen to those people? They usually stop coming. Yeah, they'll go somewhere else, or they'll just stop going altogether. And so we miss out on the results, right? So we can't look around and say, well, we had a good marriage. Yeah, of course we do. Everybody that's here is married, and we're going to stay married. If you don't stay married, chances are, and doesn't have to be this way, but chances are one or both are going to leave, and you don't really count them in the mix anymore. So we can't do it by testing, by looking around, is what I'm saying. And statistically, it's pretty dismal when we're looking at that. All right, so let's look in Matthew chapter 19. Jesus was asked about divorce. And so I realize that there are lots and lots of debates and lots of ways that people interpret things. I'm trying to figure out the best way to just simply present what is stated without getting into a lot of argumentation. We can have more discussion later if that's necessary, but yes, ma'am. Well, you're right. I mean, we shouldn't be arguing about it. We should have discussion about it, but and that's fine. There is definitely a lot of controversy. I do believe that the scriptures can be understood, but I do also realize that there are a lot of people that have said a lot of things that complicate the issue. Yeah.
Historically, civilizations were polygamous until Jesus said what he did in Matthew 19.
Historically, they were polygamous. Yeah, most were. That's right.
There's not a culture in ancient history that I'm aware of that was not polygamous.
Yeah, I could agree with that. I don't know of any either. Not that I know that much about it, but yeah. The intention was for the Jewish people to be monogamous, but that wasn't. It was always God's intention for monogamy, but didn't take us long. It was just a few generations before we had the first man who had multiple wives, and he incidentally was also a murderer. I'm not saying that those go hand in hand, but I'm saying you have to suspect if you have bad morals in one area, you're going to have bad morals in another. So, and from there we see it just proliferating, going all over the place, right? And there are actually a lot of reasons for. We assume polygamy in America. We assume it's all about hedonism, but it's not. In fact, most of the world, polygamy is an answer to how to live a better life. And I don't agree with it. But for example, in Africa, women can't survive by themselves, or it's very difficult for them to survive by themselves. So the culture has just accepted polygamy, so one man may take in multiple wives. And I'm not saying that there's not any hedonism involved in it. I'm just saying that it's not always as the root, so it makes it more complicated to deal with. Yes? I've heard of it. There's not. I've heard that it's happened in some cultures, but that it's extremely, extremely rare. What? Yeah. No one would be that dumb. Well, that shows you how men view women versus women view men. Yeah. There's some truth there. There have been cultures, and they would be matriarchal societies where it's happened, but those are rare and they die out pretty quickly, from what I understand. So it's a great question, though. All right, so Jesus is asked in Matthew chapter 19 about divorce. The Pharisees in verse 3 came to him, testing him and saying to him, "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for just any reason?" Now that's a very loaded question, right? What was the practice or what was the common ideas in that culture about divorce? Moses permitted it so they could do it, yeah. And there are actually two extremes, two ideas in the culture, but the most accepted one was that one. Moses said we could do it, so we're going to do it, and it could be for any reason you want. We're going to look at Deuteronomy in just a minute. But basically, it's if you find anything in her that you just don't like, you're free to divorce her. And so there's reports of a woman being divorced because she burnt the toast too much, things like that, ridiculous. And there was the other side of that said you can't divorce for any reason whatsoever, ever, for any reason. And Jesus is being asked this question, and of course, the answer, why would this be a problem question? They're trying to do this to catch him or to test him, right?
I mean, the Pharisees were constantly trying to trick him.
Yeah. So what kind of trouble could he get in over this? I mean, it's the same reason that some people would ask a preacher today about divorce. They want to pick a fight. That's a great way to do it. We can have all kinds of reasons. So there's lots of things going on, and I don't understand. I don't know all about the culture. I just know that there's two prevailing ideas that are there, and he's trying to find a way to present the truth without making it sound like he's picking a side. And that's usually how he's doing this, which he did masterfully. So they said, "For just any reason." And he answered and said to them, "Have you not read that he who made them at the beginning made them male and female, and said, for this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh." So what did he do with the answer in answer to that? He just went all the way back to the beginning. Let's just start from the beginning, right? So we know this is from Genesis chapter 2. And in fact, if you want to go back there, you'll see it's just a direct quotation. But in chapter 2, it says in verse 24, "Man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh." Now, who is the one who said that? Who does it seem like Jesus is saying said that? Is that who Jesus said was saying it? Yeah, so did Adam say that last verse too? No, that's it. Okay, my question is, in Matthew chapter 19, who did Jesus say said it? Have you not read that he made him at the beginning, made them male and female, and said, he said God said it. Doesn't matter. It's truth either way, right? But, this is one of those things when I'm teaching, sometimes I realize I had always been taught that Genesis 2:24 was what Adam said, but Jesus said God said it. Interesting.
There is a period for man, and therefore it's normally a conjunction that, or to draw a conclusion. So
Yeah.
I guess it could be from where the Lord was talking in 21 and 22.
It could be.
Actually put 23 after 24.
It could also be that God said it through Moses, who was writing it down, right? I mean, there's a lot of ways of looking at it. Yeah. Right. So, I'm not trying to make a big deal out of it. I'm just saying it's interesting. And so anyway, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife. What do we have here in those verses? We have a man shall, we call this leave and cleave, right? Man shall, he's going to leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife. What does that imply? What does that imply? No, they didn't have father and mother yet. Right. Yeah. It's separation. So the father, the son has to come out from the umbrella of the parents and take control of his own life. And when he does that, he can have a wife. You can't have a wife under the control of the parents, right? This isn't a child thing. So when the man is old enough or mature enough to be able to strike out on his own, he can be married, and he will be joined to his wife, and they will become one flesh. And there's a whole lot of things going on there with that idea, but that's the idea that they're coming together and they're one unit, right? They're one, and God is the one who puts them together. Okay, so he says in verse 6, sorry. So then they're no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let not man separate. They said to him, why then did Moses command to give a certificate of divorce and put her away? And he said to them, Moses, because of the hardness of your hearts, permitted you to divorce your wives, but from the beginning it was not so. And I say to you, whoever divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another commits adultery. Whoever marries her who is divorced commits adultery. We can actually read further. His disciples said to him, if such is the case of the man with his wife, it's better not to marry. But he said to them, all can't accept this saying, but only those to whom it has been given. For there are eunuchs who were born thus from their mother's womb, and there are eunuchs who were made eunuchs by men. There are eunuchs who have made themselves eunuchs for the kingdom of heaven's sake. He who is able to accept it, let him accept it. All right, so what is he telling them that it's difficult to accept in verse 12? Or verse 11? All can't accept this saying. What saying is he talking about? Verse 9? Yes, but what he says is all can't accept it, so whoever can accept it, accept it. Who can't accept it, don't accept it.
So either you want to stay single, or you accept the responsibility of being married. It's one of the two.
One of the two. Well, the disciple said, if such is the case of the man with his wife, it's better not to marry at all. Why would it be better not to marry? Right. So you don't have a divorce problem. The cause of every divorce is marriage. You can't have a divorce without a marriage. I mean, it's just impossible, right? He tells them, they say, well, if that's the case, if we got to be that strict with it, then we probably better not marry. And he says, all can't accept this, but only those to whom it has been given. And then he explains what he means by that. He says, there are eunuchs who are born, we know what a eunuch is, born thus from the mother's womb, okay? And there are eunuchs who are made eunuchs by men, and then there are eunuchs who have made themselves eunuchs for the kingdom of heaven. What does that mean to make yourself a eunuch for the kingdom of heaven's sake? Right. You made the choice not to enter into this relationship, right? And there may be many reasons for that choice, but Is it wrong to not be married? No, it's not. In fact, there may be times when it's advantageous that we're not married. Paul even talked about that in the moment of distress to the Corinthians. So maybe you should be like me. Yeah.
The Union soldier that shot John Wood and made himself a unit for that very reason.
Really?
Yeah. He made himself what?
He'd made himself a unit.
He made himself a unit. For that very reason.
So that may have literally happened. I don't think he means necessarily literal, but yeah.
He's not talking literally.
He's not talking literally. That comes up, somebody asked me one time, should I really think about cutting my hand off? I'm like, are you kidding me? How's that going to first of all, how's it going to make you more holy to cut your hand off? Your right hand offends you, cut it off. Somebody asked me, he said, oh, if you believe the Bible, then why haven't you cut your right hand off yet or plucked out your right eye? Like, because my hand and my eye didn't sin, my heart did. If it helped me, sure. If we want to use it to go to heaven, yeah. But yeah,
Plus the blood of Jesus says,
that's right. Yeah. Okay, so according to verses 3 through, so we explained the eunuch and all these things related to that satisfactorily, I think. And he's now, verses 3 through 9 is the main crux of what he's saying. What is the message, the general law regarding how long marriage is supposed to last? For life. Yeah, and there's no escaping that. He's very, very plain about it. And what is why is marriage for that length of time? Because God said it was. Okay, so in essence, look at what he's saying in verse 5. This reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. In verse 6, he says, so then they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let not man separate. So who is it that joined the husband and the wife together? God. All right, how did that happen? Right. He's the one that set it aside. He's the one that created it. He's the one that set it in. And in fact, all of our society is based on marriage, right? Our society would not function without marriage, and it would not function well. Now, there are people that disagree with that, and they want to erase marriages, but that's going to be disastrous if that happens, for many, many reasons, and not the least of which is morality. But anyway, that the husband and wife are being joined together. So if what Jesus says, if what God joins together, who is the one who can separate it if God joins them? Right. He is the one that could, if he wanted to, because he's the one that put them together, right? But no one else can, because in order for and that's even debatable about God doing it. I'm just saying, in order for a human to look at a marriage and say, I don't want y'all to be together anymore, and separate them out, they have to stand in a position to tell God that he did not do it right. Or they have to stand in position to judge that relationship and say, no, I know God put you together, but he shouldn't have. Right? Yeah.
He's given us all the tools for us to be able to belong together with each other.
Sure.
So he's given us everything we know in the scriptures to have a good conversation with the husband, have a good conversation with the wife, and to live together.
Oh, yeah.
There's good reasons for us to be together.
Oh, very good.
Because one person can't stand by himself and normally survive. It's better for two to live together and survive than one.
Yeah. It makes life a lot better, a lot easier, if you want to put it that way. So you're right. The very fact that we are one body in relationship, husband and wife, it implies a lot of things. I had I was teaching at Brown Trail, and I had a break in my, I don't know how this guy found out I was on break, and he called me up and said, "Hey man, I'm having problems, and I'm just fed up with my wife. I got the divorce papers, and I'm heading to the courthouse right now, and I'm going to file for divorce. What should I do?" Like, what do you mean, what should I do? I said, "Did she cheat on you?" No, she's just mean. Just can't stand her. I said, "You need to turn your car around and go talk to your wife." Why? Because why was he asking me, first of all? Why was he asking me? He knew it was wrong. Why was he asking me? He wanted me to say it's okay, so he could blame me for it. I'm like, there's no way I said, you know what Jesus said about that? What God has joined together, let not man separate. That's what Jesus said about it. Yeah, but, I said, well, you're going to have to yeah, but to Jesus, because that's what I'm going to tell you. And he said, what about Paul? I said, Paul said, which we'll talk about, Paul said, don't divorce. But if you do, don't marry anyone else. So I said, the intention of Paul's words was not to contradict Jesus, who said that marriage is for life. But people pit Paul and Jesus against each other as if they're arguing with each other. That's not what Paul was doing. And even if he were, he has no right to tell Jesus that he was wrong. They have to do that it's okay, right? There's no way that he was saying that. So we have to look into a little bit more detail, I guess. All right. Jesus then said, we're brought together. Oh, another thing about this union that implies is what attitude should the husband and both, the husband and wife have toward the marriage? If you think you're never going to get out of this thing, what should you do? You ought to work to make it pleasant. That's right. You ought to do whatever it takes to make it work. Now, I realize that it doesn't always happen, but you do whatever it takes to make it work. And, this happens to be the fact that it takes two to tango. It takes two to make it work. That's true, and it's better to have 100% and 100%. But I've seen it work with 90 and 10. I've seen a lot of things happen and work together, and we really have to have that base foundational understanding that this is going to have to work. When Carla and I got married, even before we got married, we were told we had a year and a half of premarital counseling. I was so sick of premarital counseling. One of the things they said over and over and over and over is never to use the D word, divorce. We never said the word. We never, ever said it in the heated conversation. You never even give someone the thought that you might even be considering it, because it's not an option. And that was from the beginning. That doesn't mean that it's going to be a magic pill, but that's not an option. Yeah.
I have a nephew back in Middle Tennessee there, and what he's taught his kids, and he's taught an awful lot of church members. He said, to have a good marriage, he said, it takes three. It takes a husband, a wife, and a daughter.
Yeah, that's going to be ideal. That's going to be ideal, that you're going to have God in there. And with his teachings, you can make it work. And that has to be part of it. All right, let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 24. Because this is where they got their idea. Now, Jesus got his words from Genesis 2, and Deuteronomy 24 is where the Jews got their words about divorce. When a man takes a wife and marries her, and it happens that she finds no favor in his eyes because he has found some uncleanness in her, and he writes her a certificate of divorce, puts it in her hand, and sends her out of her house. When she has departed from his house and goes and becomes another man's wife, if the latter husband detests her and writes her certificate of divorce, puts it in her hand, and sends her out of his house, or if the latter husband dies who took her as his wife, her former husband who divorced her must not take her back to be his wife after she has been defiled, for that is an abomination before the Lord, and you shall not bring sin on the land which the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance. Okay, so please tell me what was commanded here. Yeah. That was what was commanded. That if he's thrown her out, defiled her in that way, and she had to go get someone else, and that guy kicks her out or dies, she can't go back to that original guy. What's he trying to do here? Moses. Do you really want to get rid of her? Shows responsibility. Yeah.
He's actually protecting.
He's protecting the women. Yeah.
A husband cannot treat his wife, even under the law of Moses, like she's chattel property.
Right. You can't treat her like property. You can't treat her like a slave. You can't just kick her out on a whim and say, okay, I think I want you back. Marriage doesn't work that way. And Moses is saying, if these things happen and you do all this stuff, you better not misbehave and play the yo-yo game, right? That's what he's saying. That is the commandment. Now, look at how they phrased it in Matthew chapter 19. They said, let's see, verse 7, why then did Moses command to give a certificate of divorce and to put her away? What's the problem with that question? Moses never commanded that they put anybody away. He allowed it, of course. He didn't even allow it. He just said, if it happens, this is how you should behave. So Moses, because of the hardness of your hearts, permitted you to divorce. Now that permitted is not exactly the same way we would say permit. Like, I let someone borrow my car. I permitted them to have it. That's not what he's saying here. He's not saying, yeah, go ahead and do it if you want to. He's saying that the idea of permit here is more broad than that, in my understanding. He is suggesting that if this stuff happened, here are the regulations to make sure people are protected even more. Did they already have regulations against unlawful divorce? Oh, you're in Deuteronomy? That's where the root of all the debate is. What does uncleanness mean? Some people took it to mean she is sexually impure, and other people took it to mean she burnt the toast. That's where the problem was. And Moses didn't give a commandment to divorce anyone. He said, if that happens, this is how you behave, right? So when Jesus dealt with that, the rule in general is you're together for life. Moses never commanded anything opposite of that. And in fact, when Moses wrote Genesis chapter 2, he intended for that to mean that we are all together for life. And then if you look at back in Matthew chapter 19, what exception does he give related to divorce? Fornication. Verse 9, I say to you, whoever divorces his wife except for sexual immorality. Now, my translation says sexual immorality. That's not a fair translation. It's fornication. What's the difference? Fornication is an act. It's the act. Can you have a sexual sin without the action of together in bed? Yes. Jesus said if you look at a woman to lust, you've already committed adultery in your heart with her. Is that fornication? No. Is it sexual immorality? Yes, it is. So this translation, New King James, terrible. It's not good. NIV has it too, I think. But the word is fornication. So we have to be aware of what the word actually says and have to understand what it means too. So look at what he even says. If then whoever divorces his wife. Now we're going to take out the exception in verse 9, except for sexual immorality. We're going to remove that for just a side. We're going to look at just the general statement in verse 9. I say to you, whoever divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery. What is adultery, by the way? It's a specific sexual sin, right? How do you commit adultery? What do you have to be in order to commit adultery? You got to be married. I thought they were divorced. He says, whoever divorces his wife and marries somebody else is committing adultery. Just because someone separates does not mean that God separated them, right? If God put them together, I mean, a husband and wife who God put together, they have every right as human beings to decide we're going to live in separate houses and we're going to separate and we're going to even divorce. But that doesn't mean that they've separated what God put together, does it? No, it doesn't mean that. It just means in their view, they decided to do that. Jesus said, what God has put together, let no man put aside. He wasn't saying it's best not to do that. He said, you can't do that. You can't separate what God has put together. And so the problem then is they view themselves as being divorced, and Jesus says, you go marry someone else, what are you doing? You're committing adultery. Who are you committing adultery against? Not the woman you marry, the woman you divorced, because you're still married to her. That's it. That's what he's saying. There's no escaping that. If that wasn't true, he wouldn't have called it adultery. He would have called it fornication or something else, but it's not. All right, so anyway, then he says, if whoever marries her who is divorced commits adultery. Same instances, same things that are going on there. She can't divorce either. And the exception is for sexual immorality or for fornication. That's there. All right. Well, we don't have time to get into 1 Corinthians 7:10. Paul's general rule about that is bell's going to ring anytime. So let me just read that and stir the can a little bit. To the married I command, yet not I, but the Lord. A wife is not to depart from her husband. That's the general rule. So when somebody asks, I've had a lot of people over the years ask me if it's okay to leave so-and-so because of this or that. And you have to be really careful how you answer that question, because what Jesus said and what that God does cannot be renounced or revoked. So that I realize that there's a lot of complications. Someone asked one time, why is a divorce like many other things? Why is it so complicated? And the answer is not because God made it complicated. It's because we messed everything up so much that we made it more complicated. And we can come up with scenario after scenario after scenario. What if this and what if that? We just got to get back to the scriptures. Yeah. Make the decision right. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. I mean, once you make that decision and you're in it, you don't have to sit around. You shouldn't sit around worried, did I make the right choice? You make that choice right. Right. That's a good point. All right. Very good. Thank you. Yeah.